Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Back in April, I announced that I was going to make my own card game, and I promised to provide updates along the way, and now here we are. I just made a print and play beta version available to my patrons, and I'm going to tell you all about the steps that got me to this point. But first, remember how when you were little, your teacher would tell you to put your thinking cap on? Well, it turns out you can still do that as an adult, only it becomes a thinking shirt. Into the AM has become my choice for inspiring clothing. They've got some eye-popping graphic tees that always put me in a creative mood. They're tailor-fitted and super comfortable, which helps me to really focus on whatever I'm doing, from writing my next script to making a deck for Friday Night Magic. Solid color basics and graphic tees are available in discounted bundles, making them perfect for refreshing your summer wardrobe. And if you shop using my link down in the description, you'll save an additional 10% and help support the channel, which Nicole and I really appreciate. Okay, now that we're all dressed for success, let's talk about how I made my card game. In my first video, I explained I was going to try to make a game with a science fiction setting featuring little robots called mops that were given the task of cleaning up the galaxy. I wanted a game in which players started off weak but could improve the abilities of their mop over time, eventually earning themselves the right to retire or celebrate victory however a robot would. Maybe it's battery acid mimosas. I don't know. Anyway, that video also got a lot of comments from people telling me I had to watch the 7 Deadly Sins of card games because they were afraid I was going to create an unplayable train wreck of a game. So I did watch those videos, and I will link to them in the description, but I also want to say I do not agree with everything they claimed was a sin. Perhaps that's a video for another time. The first key decision that I made was that my game would actually be a deck builder. This would greatly simplify the number of cards I had to design, while leaving the door open for expansions in the future should I ever want to make more. In a deck builder, players usually start with a small and weak deck of cards and then get to add better cards to it, often by purchasing cards from a shared row of options. So this immediately lined up with my concept of starting with a weak mop that gets more efficient as the game goes on. And again, the fact that everything you needed to play would be contained in one box was also really appealing. Okay, I am making a deck builder. Check. Now, what is the goal of the game? How does a player win exactly? Well, this required a bit of creative thinking. Everyone has their own method for coming up with ideas, I'm sure. I started by making a list of the most powerful things you could do with cards. My list began with things like playing a really big or expensive spell, drawing a ton of other cards, and dealing a huge amount of damage, before it started to get more abstract. And the one I liked the most was play a royal flush, which is a very hard thing to pull off in a game of poker, and it is, arguably, one of the most powerful things you can do with cards in a game. As luck would have it, I played a lot of poker in college, maybe too much depending on who you ask. Most of my fun money came right out of the wallets of inexperienced freshmen, in fact. Since I was already familiar with that game, I thought it might make a good foundation for my own game. So now things are starting to take shape. Players would begin with a deck that could only make very weak poker hands, like 2 pair, but they'd be able to add more cards to their deck that would unlock bigger hands, like flushes and full houses, with the goal of eventually hitting a royal flush. What about the cleaning part? How would players show their skill at making the galaxy a safer place? Well, along the way toward that royal flush, players could use their hand of cards to defeat a threat or obstacle. More difficult challenges would reward better prizes, incentivizing players to keep upgrading their deck. So that's where the dirt deck comes in. I again started with a brainstorming list of all the things a mop might be asked to deal with in space, and then assigned each of them 2 things. The first would be how difficult this spot is to clean, and thanks to the clear hierarchy of poker hands, I could scale them pretty easily. The second was the spot's payout, or size of the reward it would give you if you were able to meet or beat the required poker hand. So for example, to fix the drifting satellite, you need 2 pair, which is a hand that even your starting deck is capable of producing, so that's really easy, but it only pays out 1 point. Meanwhile, cleaning up the mysterious goo requires 4 of a kind, which is impossible for your starting deck to make, as it only has 2 copies of each card to begin with. If you can get yourself there, though, you'll gain 6 points. But what are these points, and what do you do with them? That was the next question I had to answer. Remember, I had originally wanted players to try to hit a royal flush, which traditionally is the 10, jack, queen, king, and ace, all in a single suit, like hearts or clubs. In my mind, the points that you won from cleaning should, logically, help you reach this goal somehow. The easiest way that I could see was to make those payouts also be cards themselves, which could then go right into your deck. In my first video, I spoke briefly about how I really liked the elegance of the Star Wars card game. As players lose their connection to the Force, their deck diminishes, and when their deck is gone, they lose the game. Turns out, a lot of you consider this to be a sin of card game design. I personally don't agree. I think life decking, as it's often called, is fine. Most of the arguments against it come down to people want to play with the cards in their deck. But realistically, you were never going to draw the bottom 40 cards of your 60 card deck anyway. So to me, it seems fine to use them as a counter or a resource. But again, we can discuss all of that in another video. The good news is you can just flip it. Instead of taking cards away from someone to show how close they are to losing, you can give cards to someone to make them more likely to win. You still only need the cards that came with the game. You don't need any extra dice or tokens or score sheets. When a player draws exactly the 5 cards they need, they win, and they can take steps each turn to put more of the needed cards right into their own deck. In order to simplify things a bit though, I didn't want there to be 5 different types of point cards, and I didn't want to make the player decide which one to take or try to remember which ones were already in their deck or anything like that. So I tweaked my idea a bit. Rather than chasing a true royal flush, what if a player just needed 5 of the best card in the game, which is the ace? If we make the payout cards all be aces and make that the only way to earn aces, then players would have to clean locations to get the aces. They could then adjust their own strategy, go for low-hanging fruit and try to keep their deck lean but relatively weak as they cash in on 2 pair and 3 of a kind, or go big, try to clean up locations that require a flush or a full house, and then collect a lot of aces at once. But how would they add other helpful cards to their deck? What would that look like? Well, as I mentioned earlier, a deck builder usually has a row of cards available for all players to buy from. So that's where I would make other cards available for purchase, and it would give me another way to add some flavor to my game. Remember, you start with a basic floor model mop, and you're going to upgrade it over time so you can clean those really hard to reach places. Your initial deck contains 10 cards, with 2 copies each of 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. These cards have no suit to them, so you can make 2 pair, and maybe a straight if you get lucky, but otherwise, the higher tiers of poker hands are way out of your reach. So you've got some choices to make. You can try to build your mop up as a specialist in one type of cleaning, or become more of a generalist who can do a little bit of everything. I decided to try just 3 suits of cards to begin with, and their names are not final, but so far I've got weapons, shields, and recon. So you could add some firepower to your mop and clean things by blowing them up. Or you could add some armor and toughness and just outlast everything. Or you could be more of a rogue type who scouts things out and then slips in to do the job unnoticed. Cool, cool. Flavors coming together. Each suit has something unique about it. The game is really starting to take shape. So let's take a look at the whole thing now. Players start with a 10-card deck of basic cards. On their turn, they can buy new cards from a shared row or clean a location from the available choices in a different row. Cleaning locations pays out in aces, and you win the game by playing a hand of 5 aces. Not only that, but aces will make it easier to buy other cards, and they can help you clean more difficult locations. As is usually the case in deck builders, at the end of your turn, you discard your whole hand and draw 5 new cards. If you can't, you shuffle your discard pile and use it to make a new deck to draw from. Thus, the cards you buy and the aces you earn get cycled back into your deck to be drawn on future hands. So that gives me a pretty good gameplay loop. I just want to spend a minute taking a look at the shop deck though. How would players be able to buy cards? In most deck builders, like Star Realms, there are currency cards, but so far my game didn't have anything like that. Well, we are already playing with cards that have suits and values on them. There's another popular casino game that also uses card values to determine the outcome of the game, which I really like, and that's Blackjack. I really like how the math works out here, because if we say that you can buy any card out of the shop row with 21 credits supplied by the cards from your hand, then it's going to take you 3 cards on average, which limits you to 1 purchase per turn since you only have a 5-card hand. But if we make our aces worth 11, like they are in Blackjack, now you can buy a card with just 2 cards, improving your efficiency. Okay, but why wouldn't you just always buy the highest value card in the shop since they all cost the same? Great question, audience member. I can balance things out a bit, or at least incentivize players to pick up smaller value cards by giving those cards more powerful actions. And this works great with each of our suits having a different flavor to them. You might want a lower valued card from a suit you already have a lot of, rather than just grabbing the highest value of a suit you don't have any of yet. I made the weapon cards aggressive and all about tempo. They let you discard other cards from your hand to draw new ones. I took inspiration from cards like Thrill of Possibility. Shields can recover used cards from your discard pile, which I've decided to call your bin, like a dust bin, since this is a cleaning game. They can also buy new cards a little more efficiently, so they're sort of like black and green in Magic. And recon cards let you control the top of your deck with actions that behave like the scry mechanic or brainstorm from Blue. This was enough to do my alpha testing. I created a spreadsheet with pages for each type of card and would add on a few rough ideas each day as they came to me. Eventually, I had enough that I could load them into a program called Nandeck, which is a fantastic bit of free software that converts spreadsheet data into printable card files. I then printed out paper versions of my alpha cards and started testing the game with my family and close friends. Some things became immediately apparent. The game was a little slow, with too many locations that were difficult to clean and rewards that didn't quite feel worth it. Some actions were stronger than others, which was intentional, but they could be balanced a bit better so that players would get to still make meaningful choices. So I took all that feedback and I revised some things, which gave me a beta edition to play with. Now, the curve of the dirt deck is a little bit lower, and the power difference between shop cards is a little more flat. Aces also gained the ability to become part of a straight, and they can represent any suit in a flush, making them behave more like true wild cards. This is where I opened things up to my patrons. I just released the game files and invited people to print them off at home. And it's not too late. You can become a patron using the link down below, and you'll immediately get access to both the print and play beta files and our exclusive Discord, where you can join the conversation and share your own thoughts on the game. Anyone who partakes in the beta will also get their name added to the game's credits when it is finally published as well. Overall, I am very happy with how things are progressing, but I know I still have a lot of work ahead of me. The beta test is definitely going to reveal some more rough spots in the game, and I've already gotten questions about the rules, which tells me I've got to make some edits there as well. But overall, I've got something here that I think is fun and flavorful. It pays tribute to my love of casino games like poker and blackjack, and it has an exciting build-up as you keep adding aces to your deck to get yourself closer and closer to hitting your winning draw. So, what do you think? Am I going about this right? Is this a game you'd like to try out yourself, either in the rough beta form or as a polished final product? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss my next game update. We'll see ya.